Hi, I'm Ken. I'm a client portfolio manager here at Candriam, and I'm super excited today to have with me Servaas Michielssens, our global head of healthcare, and Linden Thomson, portfolio manager of both biotechnology and oncology. And both are super passionate about healthcare investing. And we've had a long experience at Candriam with over 4.5 billion assets under management in 3 different strategies. And so today we wanted to explore healthcare together. Now, my first question is, why should we start exploring healthcare today?
Well, Ken, as you know, healthcare has been gone through a bit of a difficult time. One of the reasons was basically because there was so much limelight on technology. But also, if you think about what happened the past couple of years, we had the COVID pandemic. And what happened in healthcare in the COVID pandemic, obviously, there were the vaccines, there were the drugs. There was huge stress on the supply chain within healthcare. And basically what happened, there was a lot of inventory built, high sales of COVID-related products. And following that period of the pandemic, we needed a little bit of time to reset the earnings within healthcare. There was basically a destocking happening. There was the sales of the vaccines, of the COVID pills reducing. And that's basically also what you see in the earnings of healthcare companies. Healthcare companies have typically over the history, they have grown very steadily. But in COVID, there was really an explosion, but also a reset post that COVID period. And that is what we went through. But what you also see is that we're basically mostly through that period now. We're back to the steady growth within the healthcare sector. And if you zoom out a bit, I mean, healthcare EPS has grown above the market, but has also done that with a volatility that is less than the volatility of the overall market. Basically, healthcare earnings per share has been very stable, apart from then the COVID period, which is also logical if you think about it. I mean, healthcare spending is not discretionary spending, it's an absolute necessity.
And what are the main drivers for earnings and superior performance then for the healthcare sector?
Yeah, I think that if we look at the next slide, this just echoes what Servaas has just said in terms of the long-term, successful growth that we've seen in the healthcare sector. Yes, we've had a short period of difficult earnings growth and sales growth from the reset post-COVID. But I think that this shows you just over the long term, the excellent sales growth that we've seen in healthcare relative to the rest of the market. And indeed, the correlation between this earnings per share growth and the returns that investors can see. In terms of what's driving this, obviously this is a very innovation-led growth sector. And underlying that, there's also some demographic tailwinds in terms of the fact that we're an aging population globally. As we age, we spend more on healthcare. There's more of us living more sedentary lifestyles. A lot of that decision and impact means that we've got more chronic lifestyle conditions. And so those are some significant drivers of this growth.
There are, of course, long-term drivers. What about today?
Well, if you look today, I mean, it's always very hard to time and predict what's going to happen in the market. But what you see basically today, we come out of a period with high inflation. Central banks raised interest rates and are now at the point where they're starting to bring those interest rates down. Where the economy will land in that situation, it's very difficult to predict. I will not say we're going necessarily into a recession, but there is at least some slowdown. And what you see, healthcare typically outperforms the markets during a bit more uncertain economic times. And the other angle to this is obviously interest rates are going down. And typically, when interest rates are going down, it also helps the performance of the healthcare sector. And it especially helps that part of the healthcare sector that is a bit more, let's say, long duration. For example, biotechnology typically outperforms the market by about 4% when interest rates are high and falling. Now, we talked a lot about the macro environment. I would like to stress, obviously, I mean, in our investment process, we look fundamentally at good companies that can have strong earnings per share growth. And in this sector, basically what drives earnings per share growth is especially clinical data. And we've seen a lot of good clinical data this year, and we've seen then clinical data being nicely rewarded also by increasing share price, because that in the end, in the long term in this sector, predicts earnings per share growth.
Okay, that's clear. However, given the upcoming US presidential elections, aren't you concerned about increased market volatility?
Yeah, I think that that's certainly a big focus for investors and a question that we get quite often at the moment going into this election cycle. Healthcare tends to be in the top 1, 2, or 3 agenda items for US presidential elections. Obviously, the success and the health of the US pharmaceutical device and healthcare sector generally is very important for our sector. This one, however, 2024, healthcare has dropped to a lower level in terms of the focus. And so I think that volatility is expected to be likely to be lower than we've traditionally seen. That's not to say that, we won't see some volatility. Generally, we think of a Republican president as slightly more positive for the sector. However, in this case, there are many unknowns of what a Trump president would bring for the sector, and he has been known to speak fairly negatively in terms of rhetoric for pharma. And so I think the outlook is much more balanced between both parties. Harris is more unknown in terms of where she would like to go longer term, but in the short term, certainly she appears to be a continuation on of the democratic policies that we've seen in healthcare. And just one other thing I wanted to bring up in terms of the US political arena is just the focus on the pricing of drugs from the Inflation Reduction Act. This has been a huge move from the Democrats over the last couple of years, the ability for the US government to negotiate on drug prices. So far, the initial prices that we've seen for some of these early drugs have been very manageable, but it's certainly something as investors in the healthcare sector we are very focused on a long-term basis in terms of measuring that potential risk going forward.
Mm-hmm. Now, given the breadth of the healthcare sector, from healthcare equipment to insurance and biotechnology, where do you see the most investment opportunities today?
I think, as we've laid out in this, we're in a pretty good spot for healthcare. It offers both a kind of defensive angle. It also offers an innovation side as well. I would like to put the point across for biotech sector here. I don't think that the last 2 or 3 years we've seen share prices reflect the fundamental underlying progress that we've seen in the sector. R&D successes, as Servaas spoke about before, have been obvious, particularly in the last 6 months. We've had some really, good success stories and share prices that reflect that. We've got a regulator in the FDA that is continually approving good quality, efficacious drugs. M&A last year was one of the highest we've seen for the sector. And so we've got all of this progress that we've seen in the sector, but because of COVID, because of interest rate rise environments, that share price has not reflected those, big fundamental drivers. As we move forward, as we look to the next, economic cycle, as it were, if interest rates do start plateauing and coming down, I think that that's supportive of this sector. And so, we should see some of that progress being reflected in share prices.
Okay, when talking about biotechnology and the development of treatments, are you looking at specific therapeutic areas, obesity, right? Or
Well, Ken, I think obesity for sure remains a focus in the market. If you look today, what happened in the obesity market, penetration today is about single digits. There are several tens of billions of sales already today, and it's projected to grow to over 100 billions in sales. So I think if you just look at the sales performance and that trajectory, it's an interesting market. We see also novel modalities coming, so there is a lot happening in that space given the market. But what's maybe more important is if you look at the impact that those medications have for patients. It's not only about weight loss. Today we see that driven by those GLP-1s and the weight loss, there is an improvement in kidney health, there is an improvement in cardiac health, there is an improvement in liver function. And also what is very remarkable and maybe somewhat surprising to some is that we also see an improvement in cancer prevention. Basically, the fact that those GLP-1s reduce the incidence of obesity-related cancer. That's a data set. I mean, we always had a kind of correlation between obesity and cancer, but at the American Society of Clinical Oncology, for the first time, we saw a data set that really clearly demonstrated the impact of GLP-1 use and bariatric surgery on the reduction of the incidence of obesity-related cancer. So it's very exciting, both as an investor, but I think also for like global health, what's happening in that obesity space.
And Linden, do you see, for instance, also potential in other therapeutic areas?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many unmet medical needs. That's what we look for. Opportunities for companies, for products to make a difference for patients in areas where they don't have anything else, or, better quality, better efficacious products. And so, 3 other therapeutic areas I would highlight, although there are many more. Orphan diseases. This has always been a really sweet spot for biotech because you can produce drugs that have a huge impact for patients and often a more accelerated approval path. There are thought to be 6,000 orphan indications, of which there's only a small number that have got effective therapies today. So there's obviously a lot of opportunity there. Secondly, I would look at oncology, a big focus for us here at Candriam. It's the number 1 therapeutic area in terms of R&D dollar spend. It's the number 1 area in terms of M&A activity. And, it's still a huge unmet medical need. Yes, there's a lot of success happening, but there's still, much more to give. And then finally, I would probably look at neurology. This is an area that I feel like we are, where we were in oncology 20 years ago. So our understanding of the brain, our understanding of the mechanisms of disease, perhaps a genetic element to that, is still in its infancy. But as we, learn more, we're able to make more targeted therapies, and we're already seeing some of the successes that have come out of that. So that would be a 3rd therapeutic area I would highlight.
Okay, thank you. So basically, you're looking at healthcare as a long-term opportunity, and then with some additional focus, let's say, on biotechnology, obesity, oncology, and neurology. But now I think it's interesting to dive a bit more deeper now in your experience and knowledge. Servaas, you've been already at Candriam a few years ago, and then you left for a short period at a private equity experience. What made you come back to Candriam?
Well, Ken, first of all, I'm very happy to be back in this warm family. And then what drives me in this job, I mean, I'm a scientist by training, and I've always been extremely interested in drug development and innovation. And in this job, basically, you are at the forefront of that innovation. You're not, as a scientist, you're basically often focused on a very small part of it. As an investor, you have the opportunity, and it's basically your obligation to know what's happening all over the world in drug development and medical technology. So it's an extremely fascinating place to be. And obviously, it's also a way to help companies by providing them the necessary capital to develop those new products for patients. So I think that part really appeals to me. Also, the fact that by doing that, we can generate a nice return, or we hope to generate a nice return for our clients. And eventually, I think also what Candriam does in terms of donations also appeals a lot to me. It's about impact beyond the investment, but also support the entire ecosystem, give back basically to research, and make sure that all this innovation, all this positive impact for patients, that continues in the future. And then finally, I mean, it's also about people and about teamwork. And in the end, this is a highly dynamic sector. There's a lot happening. So it's really great to be working again with this team, and especially also to have Linden joining the team. It's really great to have such an experienced person in the team. And I think that will make us only stronger in the future.
Okay, welcome back. And Linden, you were really making waves at your old place. So what decided you, or what made you decide to start a new experience at Candriam?
Well, I mean, I would probably start by saying that, Rudy and Servaas have left a big legacy at Candriam, building one of the leading healthcare equity franchises across Europe. And that in and itself is a pretty good reason for me to say yes to that opportunity. You know, Rudy and myself spent 18 months or so discussing the opportunity. You know, our investment philosophy is very similar. We've been doing this for a long time. And so I think that that's led to what's so far been a successful and fairly smooth transition of the funds. I echo a lot of what Servaas has just said in terms of why you want to invest in this sector. You know, it's a fascinating sector. It's highly dynamic. And as he said, you're at the forefront of all of the fantastic innovation that we're seeing. You know, I look forward to the future. I think that in this recording, we've just given a lot of ideas, information, and reasons why healthcare at the moment is an interesting and compelling investment opportunity. And so I look forward to many years of success with Servaas and the team.
Thank you. Yeah, so I think we can conclude that it's a good time to get into healthcare. And I would like to thank both Servaas and Linden for the interesting recording we've done today. I would also like to thank you, our viewers, for your attention, and hopefully we'll meet each other in the near future.